Let her go!
Elphaba Thropp has always occupied that fascinating space for being the misunderstood queen. But Jon M's Wicked universe pushes her complexity into sharper focus for a new generation. Before she was branded the Wicked Witch of the West, Elphaba was a girl born with emerald green skin, a sharp mind, and a heart shaped as much by rejection as by resilience. Across Ozian history, her story has shifted depending on who was telling it, and Chew's cinematic vision embraces this fluidity, reframing Elphaba as someone who is a deeply human protagonist and whose misunderstood wickedness is the product of political narratives, personal loss, and the dangerous power of perception in the land of Oz. Earlier versions of Elphaba, ranging from Baum's original novels to Gregory Maguire's subversive reinterpretation and the Broadway musical, have each constructed her identity differently. Baum's witch was an emblem of villainy because she was posed as a cautionary figure of unchecked power. However, many decades later, Maguire transformed her into a symbol of moral defiance and systemic oppression. The stage musical added the emotional immediacy, which was needed for framing her as a misunderstood outcast whose righteousness makes her a threat to the status quo. Chew's recent adaptation synthesizes these strands while adding a modern cinematic intimacy that highlights her interiority. His Wicked Part 1 and Wicked Part 2 treat Elphaba's coming of age as both a political awakening and a personal reckoning, allowing us to witness the fractures that form when truth, power, and public image collide. In this universe, Elphaba is not merely reacting to fate. Rather, she's navigating a world determined to turn her difference into a narrative weapon. I think this multi-layered framing is what makes Chew's Elphaba uniquely compelling. By exploring how Oz chooses to see her and how she learns to see herself, the films position her story as a study of identity which is shaped, distorted, and reclaimed. Having said that, everyone keeps talking about her character, but today we'll discuss the anatomy of Elphaba's character in the Wicked universe. So, without wasting another moment, let's get right into it. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. Now, this is a small click for you, but for us, well, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. How did Elphaba Thropp become the Wicked Witch of Oz? Elphaba Thropp's journey from an innocent young girl to the infamous Wicked Witch of the West begins in her early life, which was shaped by a series of formative and tragic events. Born with distinctive green skin, Elphaba was immediately marked as different and became an outsider in the land of Oz. Raised by her father, who was the cruel and distant governor of Munchkinland, and her stepmother, who treated her with neglect and disdain, Elphaba grew up in an environment where she was constantly stigmatized. After her biological mother died during childbirth, Elphaba was left with a deep sense of abandonment and self-loathing, which further exacerbated her feelings of being disconnected from the world around her. Not just that, Elphaba's childhood is further complicated by the arrival of her younger sister, Nessa Rose, who was born without the ability to walk. She was both physically fragile and emotionally demanding. In her early years, Elphaba felt a deep sense of responsibility for her sister, often acting as her caretaker. However, this relationship was complicated by their father's preference for Nessa Rose, which only deepened Elphaba's sense of inadequacy and isolation. Elphaba was also highly intelligent, with a sharp mind and a natural curiosity about the world, especially in areas like politics and science, but she was rarely acknowledged for her abilities. Moreover, her father, the governor, was also not cool with the fact that Elphaba had magical abilities and made sure to blame her for anything that went wrong. Later, when she arrived at Shiz University, initially to accompany her paraplegic sister and to take care of her, Elphaba's difference became social as well as physical, because now the students were ostracizing her because of her skin and her temperament. But despite the prejudice, her magical potential was soon noticed by the university's headmistress, Madame Morrible, who then privately began tutoring her in sorcery. Eventually, during her time at the university, Elphaba becomes aware of a darker side of Oz, which mostly revolves around the systemic oppression of animals, or the sentient creatures in Oz, whose rights were being denied, their voices were being silenced. Her horror at this injustice awakened a moral and political conscience as she finally began to see how power in Oz was maintained through fear, propaganda, and exploitation rather than justice. In this way, her arc shifted from struggling to belonging to fighting for what was right. Elphaba is initially motivated by a desire to fight inequality after Dr. Dillermand is fired. However, her worldview is shaken when she meets the wizard in the Emerald City, discovers he's a fraud exploiting magical creatures. Gradually, when she was summoned to meet the Wizard of Oz, she hoped for justice and perhaps a chance to change how Oz treated the marginalized. But then the wizard was exposed as a charlatan who lacked any true magical powers and basically intended to use her to keep up his pretense. That's why he ordered her to cast a spell, using a sacred spellbook known as the Grimmerie, would grant his flying monkey guards wings, thus weaponizing magic for tyranny rather than liberation. Recognizing the betrayal of how the oppression she despised was being expanded through her own magic, Elphaba refused to comply and took the Grimmerie from the wizard before fleeing. Because she didn't give in to his manipulative schemes and fled the Emerald City, Elphaba was branded a villain by the wizard's propaganda machine. This pivotal moment was depicted in her defiant performance of Defying Gravity, which marked the beginning of her descent in the eyes of the people of Oz. Naturally, her refusal to serve the wizard's agenda and instead escaping with his spellbook had severe consequences which would become a turning point for her. The powers that be, including Madame Morrible, framed her as a threat and went as far to publicly denounce her and label her as the Wicked Witch. As a result, Elphaba abandoned the Emerald City on a broomstick, choosing to embrace her exile rather than compromising her own principles. From that moment onward, she stood as a symbol of resistance, even after she was painted as wicked by the propaganda of those who feared her power and difference. Jon M's depiction of Elphaba's turning into the Wicked Witch is less about an inherent evil and more about how power, prejudice, and hypocrisy can force a conscientious person into rebellion. Her green skin, magical ability, and isolation make her vulnerable, but then her moral clarity and refusal to be complicit make her dangerous to the corrupted establishment. In that sense, wickedness becomes a label and not a trait. Elphaba's transformation might be tragic, but it was principled, as she rejects not only the corrupt status quo of Oz, but also embraces the compromises that come with acceptance. Her so-called turn to evil in Part 1 is less about a moral fall and more about societal perception. Elphaba's rebellion against the wizard's oppressive regime against animals and her determination to protect magical creatures come at the cost of being labeled the Wicked Witch. Even in Wicked Part 2, Elphaba continued to battle against the wizard and her ultimate alienation from those she loves. By that point, Elphaba was publicly feared and vilified, while her former friend Glinda had become the spokesperson for the wizard's regime. Moreover, it certainly didn't help her that her well-intentioned choices also had increasingly dire consequences. Like when Nessa tries to cast a love spell from the Grimmerie without letting Elphaba know, and ends up shrinking Beau's heart. So, in order to save him, Elphaba tries to reverse the spell and it backfires, as Beau turns into the Tin Man. Later, when Elphaba returns to the Emerald City to free the wizard's monkeys, she learns that Dr. Dillermand has lost his ability to speak and vows to oppose the wizard. That is when Elphaba's growing defiance reaches its peak, when she disrupts Glinda's wedding with Fiyero by releasing all the caged animals on them. She also gets caught, but Fiyero helps her escape. But then, after Madame Morrible causes the death of her sister, Elphaba visits the scene of the crime, where the wizard's guards try to restrain her. But Fiyero gallantly shows up to save the day. Even though Elphaba escapes with the monkeys, Fiyero ends up getting captured by the guards. However, she just couldn't bear another loss and tried to cast a protection spell to save Fiyero. But due to the fact that she was honestly not that good at magic, he turned into a scarecrow. So every time this girl tried to do something good, it just backfired on her, which inherently further forced people to believe her to be the Wicked Witch. Why was the Wicked Witch green? In the film, Elphaba was born green because her mum Melina drank a green elixir the night of her conception. As we learn during the Wicked movie, this wasn't because of her husband, Governor Elphaba Thropp. While Glinda tells the people of Munchkinland about her history with Elphaba after her death, she begins by recalling her early years. Apparently, when Governor Thropp was out on official business, his wife Melina welcomed a dashing gentleman caller that same evening. Now, at this point, the mysterious man's identity is not revealed. It's just implied the two had an affair that led to Elphaba's conception, with our mystery man plying Melina with a green elixir. Of course, this was the physical reason why, 9 months later, a little green baby popped out. However, Melina died after giving birth to her second daughter, Nessa Rose. We later learn that this was because the governor was so worried that Nessa would also turn out to be green that he forced Melina to eat milk flowers during her pregnancy, which ultimately led to her death as it induced premature labor. Since then, the governor couldn't bear to look at Elphaba and resented her till she became an adult. It's this tension that sparks the events of Wicked, including explaining why Elphaba has magical powers. The green elixir bottle is seen frequently in Wicked, as Elphaba keeps it under her pillow as the only memory she has of her mum. Even in the Broadway musical, Elphaba's skin is believed to be green because of this green elixir that Elphaba's mother drank. She had an affair with a man who was later revealed to be the Wizard of Oz, and it was he who gave her the green elixir when Elphaba was conceived. Since the green elixir was in Elphaba's mother's system when she got pregnant, it caused the child's skin to also turn green. As teased in the musical's opening song, No One Mourns the Wicked, which features the mysterious man telling Elphaba's mother, "Have another drink of the green elixir," shortly before the musical proceeds to show Elphaba's birth. On a side note, when Elphaba's mother and the wizard are briefly seen together, the musical portrays their affair as consensual, whereas the novel portrays it as sexual assault, with the wizard using the elixir from a green glass bottle to drug her. This makes the green elixir far more evil in the novel than it is in the musical. Whatever it may be, Elphaba's green skin makes her an outcast from the moment she's born, because even her own family is disgusted by her. Her mother's husband, who she believes to be her real father, resents Elphaba and favors her sister, Nessa Rose, which creates a great deal of tension within the family. When Elphaba goes to Shiz University, her green skin initially makes her a social pariah in the eyes of her roommate, Glinda, and the other students, until an unexpected friendship begins to form between the two of them. As Elphaba's arc progresses, she simply stops caring about being accepted by others and embraces what makes her different, including her green skin. But later, when the wizard manipulates the people of Oz into fearing Elphaba as the Wicked Witch of the West, he uses her green skin as a reason to induce fear in the minds of the people of Oz about her and view her as unnatural. The irony is that her skin is green because of the green elixir he gave her mother, and her unparalleled power, including her ability to read parts of the Grimmerie, is basically rooted in one of her biological parents being from Oz and the other being from Earth. The origin of Elphaba's magical powers. So, Elphaba had magical powers since her birth, and the reason behind that was only revealed at the end of Wicked for Good, when Glinda figured out that the wizard was Elphaba's biological father. Her abilities were always there, because if you remember in that scene from her childhood, she could control the rocks to levitate when the local children bullied her younger sister Nessa. But back then, she never used the power for any violent result. And later, at Shiz University, she was furious when Miss Coddle was being overbearing on Nessa, and as a result, she accidentally used her magic to tear up the main hall of the school, thus creating a scene in front of all of her future classmates. Luckily, Madame Morrible took full credit for that incident, thus saving Elphaba from public scrutiny. As of Wicked Part 1, Elphaba's magical powers seemed inexplicable because she was born with abilities she's not entirely able to control, and she describes it in the film as a burden for herself to bear that she's always tried to hide. However, once Madame Morrible took an interest in her, she grew hopeful that the Wizard of Oz would understand her powers and be wise enough to view them as gifts rather than abnormalities. The Wicked play and novel both explain Elphaba's powers through her parentage, and the latest Wicked movie also follows the same route. But as we see in the first movie, it's Morrible who helps her structure her emotions in order to harness her powers. At first, Madame Morrible seems like a benevolent professor at Shiz University who wants to guide Elphaba in training to control her magical abilities. With her help, Elphaba is able to activate her powers through rage and moments of great emotion, which Morrible realizes. But after Elphaba fails to lift a coin by controlling her magic, Morrible uses Elphaba's social situation at Shiz to trigger her feelings, thus helping her activate her abilities, which launches the coin across the room. It doesn't seem like Morrible ever actually helps Elphaba use her powers more efficiently, because she always directs the Green Witch to use her rage to channel her abilities. Wicked's greatest lesson is perhaps that anyone whose name rhymes with horrible is not to be trusted, as Morrible is later revealed to be an agent for the wizard, using her platform as a professor to recruit spies for his cause. She was the one who wrote that animals should be seen and not heard in Dr. Dillerman's classroom, and later caused him to be replaced. The wizard's agenda was always to turn the people of Oz against the animals, so they would unite under him. thus eventually elevating his status of power as a deity. The fact that Morrible never had good intentions at heart was further amplified when she manipulated Glinda the Good to become the wizard's spokesperson to manipulate the people of Oz, and then got Nessa killed by unleashing a tornado that brings Dorothy to Oz. That really was the final tipping point for Elphaba, because when she finds out that a tornado sent by Morrible has taken a house from the human world to fatally crush Nessa, the manipulated weather, a falling house, and glittering shoes all converge to carve an irreversible wound as Elphaba arrives a bit too late to save her sister, leading her grief to sharpen into rage. So she rashly kidnaps Dorothy to retrieve her sister's shoes from the girl, which further sparks the fuel that leads the people of Oz to rally a mob against her. How is the Grimmerie an important connection to understand Elphaba's powers? So, the Grimmerie is one of the most important artifacts in the Wicked universe, and definitely has an important role to play in the overarching story of Elphaba. In fact, a major part of her journey centers around the Grimmerie, a powerful spellbook that factors heavily into secrets about Elphaba's past, present, and future. This magical artifact also turns out to become a significant part in Elphaba's evolution from a well-meaning young woman to the wrongfully reviled Wicked Witch. The Grimmerie is established as a powerful tome full of ancient spells, whose lore is established during the extended Wizardmania section of the song One Short Day. The song plays as Elphaba and Glinda arrive in the Emerald City, and then it reveals the full history of the book. Apparently, the Grimmerie was created by the magical wise ones who lived in Oz ages ago, long before the events of Wicked. Now, before they passed away, the wise ones transcribed their magic into a book, which became the Grimmerie. However, that ancient language was lost over the years, naturally making the magic inaccessible for the generations to come. Even powerful sorcerers like Madame Morrible could only manage to translate a few words. However, the wise ones also left a prophecy that someday a powerful magical sorcerer would be able to naturally read from the Grimmerie and use its powers once more. The people of the Emerald City believed this person was the wizard who literally bluffed his way into a position of power by claiming he can read the book. However, that prophesized magical sorcerer was actually Elphaba, whose raw magical potential drew the attention of Madame Morrible in the first place. Because of this natural power, Elphaba stood out among the other mystical figures in the land of Oz. While Glinda is eventually given a training wand, she showed no natural ability that could even match Elphaba. Even a seasoned and trained witch like Madame Morrible seemingly pales in comparison to Elphaba, whose lack of control gives Morrible an opening to train and manipulate her into a tool for the plans that she and the wizard initially had for Oz. It was never made exactly clear where Elphaba's magical potential stems from, but it potentially had something to do with the mysterious serum that Elphaba's mother took from the wizard. Until Wicked for Good, Elphaba's ability to read the Grimmerie made her seem to be one of the only people alive who could do so. However, at the end of the second film, Elphaba asks Glinda to take the Grimmerie, her spellbook, and keep the whole Wicked Witch myth going while doing her best to be good, mentioning how it was her last wish. But as soon as Fiyero and Elphaba leave Oz, the Grimmerie flips open for Glinda in Emerald City. When Elphaba gave her the spellbook, she assured her that Glinda would eventually learn how to read it, but to her surprise, the Grimmerie suddenly flipped open and landed on the page of a spell. Since Glinda can't harness magic to cast the spell, it definitely makes me wonder why the spellbook opens for her in the first place. My guess is that the Grimmerie might have recognized the change in Glinda, as she was no longer acting out of selfishness. At this moment, the magically mysterious book might be granting her the ability or the permission to finally use it. Moreover, the Wicked movies have shown the Grimmerie simply flipping open on its own before, usually landing on pages tied to what someone needs or desires. So, it is fully possible that Glinda, after fully embracing goodness, might finally be gaining the magic she's always longed for, and the book is just responding to that, just like it first responded to Elphaba, who always had the best intentions at heart for the world around her. But as seen in Wicked for Good, this ancient book of spells also had its downside. Sure, Elphaba had access to plenty of other powerful spells and enchantments. However, as she discovered when she accidentally cursed the monkeys with wings, the spells did have terrible unforeseen complications. Elphaba's efforts to learn more about the Grimmerie also reflect how magic always has consequences, like a double-edged sword. It's unpredictable and dangerous, which is why Bo almost dies with Nessa shrinking his heart and then gets turned into the Tin Man. Of course, we also have the flying monkeys and Fiyero turning into a scarecrow, so in that sense, The Grimmerie symbolizes knowledge that has capacity for protection, but also for destruction. For Elphaba, this creates a heavy moral burden, because every time she uses its spells, even with noble aims like liberation or justice, she risks inflicting irreversible changes. Can Elphaba see the future? So, throughout the first movie, there are hints about Elphaba's true powers as a witch, including her ability to potentially see into the future. The movie adaptation of Wicked actually allows Elphaba's magic to fully emerge and display her full potential as the future Wicked Witch of the West. Throughout the movie, Elphaba is shown to have different powers, one of them being her ability to see visions of the future, which we see upon her arrival at Shiz University after inadvertently causing the furniture to levitate, which catches the attention of Madame Morrible, who offers to give Elphaba private lessons to further channel her powers. Madame Morrible sees potential in Elphaba and states that with practice, her magic will potentially allow her to work with the wizard in the future. Because this was the first time in her life that somebody has seen something good in Elphaba, she dares to dream of better things in her life, which leads to the song The Wizard and I. Throughout this song, we see that Elphaba reflects on this positive interaction with Madame Morrible and her desire to be accepted by society and appreciated by her family. The Wizard and I is also used to allow Elphaba to catch a glimpse into what she believes to be her future, because when she gazes into the colourful glass, she sees a blurry vision of a crowd holding a celebration. While the vision isn't fully clear, Elphaba sees it as a sign that one day in the future, there'll be a big celebration in Oz for her when she works with the wizard. While Elphaba sees this as a positive vision for her future, this vision actually foreshadows the celebrations of her demise. As depicted in the opening song, No One Mourns the Wicked, the Munchkins celebrate the defeat of the Wicked Witch, which includes the burning of an effigy. As also mentioned in The Wizard and I, the vision of the celebration is depicted hazily, but it's a teasing representation of the scorn Elphaba will one day receive from Oz as the Wicked Witch of the West, which is exactly what we see in Wicked for good, because even the animals she was trying to save end up blaming her, as the wizard's spying monkeys could use their wings to easily track them down. Moreover, during her time at Shiz, we saw that Elphaba connected with the university's only animal professor, Dr. Dillamond. That's how she finds out that Dr. Dillamond and other animals were being oppressed and were at the risk of losing their ability to speak. While many animals fled Oz from the wizard's tyranny, Dr. Dillamond had chosen to stay and fight back, which is what led to his arrest during one of his classes. This incident devastated Elphaba. His arrest solidified her vow to find a solution to protect the animals and their rights throughout Oz. But after his arrest, Elphaba saw a vision of Dr. Dillamond's ultimate fate. In her vision, Elphaba saw Dr. Dillamond locked in a cage, unable to communicate. This vision horrified Elphaba and only strengthened her resolve to travel to the Emerald City and ask the wizard for help. We even see Elphaba express her belief to Dr. Dillamond that the wizard would ensure everything would be all right. Unfortunately, as Elphaba later discovers, this proves not to be the case, and her vision of Dr. Dillamond's fate turns out to be correct in the second film, when she finds him trapped in a cage in a deranged state as he could no longer speak or recognize her. Not just that, Elphaba also sensed something wrong had happened to Nessa, and that's why she ran to her rescue, even though she was too late. Lastly, Wicked for Good also includes Elphaba having a vision of the place beyond Oz, which later is revealed to be her and Fiero's destination at the end of the movie, that helps them achieve their happily ever after, away from a land that has given her nothing but pain. Can water really kill the Wicked Witch in this universe? In the traditional Oz myth, water is the ultimate weapon because it's considered to be the only thing that can melt the Wicked Witch of the West into nothing more than a puddle on the floor. Generations grew up believing it was an indisputable law of magic. But in Jon M. Chu's Wicked universe, that rule doesn't hold the way people expect. Sure, the legend still exists, and the fear around it remains strong, but its truth is something far more complicated than a simple magical weakness. When the climactic moment arrives in Wicked for Good, water is thrown on Elphaba in front of horrified witnesses. She collapses, screams, and vanishes from sight, and to the people of Oz, it looks like proof that the stories were right all along. The Wicked Witch has melted. The threat is gone. Peace at last, according to the wizard's regime, has been restored. The public accepts the spectacle immediately because from the rumours, they've been conditioned to believe that the Green Witch can be killed this way. But the truth hidden beneath the drama is far more subversive. In this universe, Dorothy throwing water towards her doesn't kill Elphaba at all. Instead, the melting is part of a carefully orchestrated escape and an illusion trick she uses at the perfect moment. Below the floorboards, there was a hidden passageway, and Elphaba just slipped through it in the instant the water hit her, thus using the myth against the very people who weaponized it. Even though the entirety of Oz and even Glinda believe her to be dead, she survives because the weakness was never real. It was a story used by those in power to define her as monstrous and vulnerable. The idea that water kills the Green Witches remains important, not because it's true, but because the belief in it shapes public perception. It allows the wizard's propaganda machine to claim victory, and it allows Elphaba the chance to disappear and finally live free of Oz's judgment. Elphaba's decision to surrender was not defeat, but indeed a strategy, a sacrifice, and a final act of protection. She realizes that if the full truth ever came out, it would destroy Glinda's reputation, exposing how Glinda's kindness had once been tied to actions of the wizard that hurt her. So, Elphaba makes Glinda promise to keep the truth buried and move forward with a clean slate, without letting people turn against her as well, just so she could have the opportunity to repair the damage done by the wizard and his minions and heal the land of its incriminating rules, just like Elphaba had always envisioned. Well, that brings us to the very end of this video. What do you guys think about the latest Wicked movie, especially the whole bittersweet ending that Elphaba received? Do you think she should ever return back to Oz? I mean, someone could do a spin-off, right? Let us know about your thoughts and theories in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.